Thank you. See if this works. Yes. Thank you, Will. I want to tell everybody again, thank you for coming today on this beautiful blue sky day. Sit here inside in the auditorium. The future of skydive education. It's the theme of the conference. So I thought it might be a right topic for me to talk about. So to talk about the future, let's first look at the current state of skydiving education. So how, as a skydiver, how do you learn skydiving and how do you progress throughout your life? For almost everyone, that means that you start with an AFF course or a French PAC course or something similar as that, or if you're lucky, a static line education. Then you have your first few jumps, you can skydive, and then most countries will work with some kind of a licensing system where you go from an A to a B, C, D license, something like this. After that, if you want to continue, you can, in USPA, it's called a coach rating. I think in Holland we call this assistant instructor. Your first steps into becoming a teacher. You can do an AFF, get an AFF instructor rating, tandem. And if you even want to continue after that, you could go into being a chief instructor or a safety and training advisor, examiner, this kind of stuff. If you look at that system, not everybody wants to become a teacher. This is only some people will actually want to become an AFF instructor or do something like that. The most skydivers will stay in this A to D range where they're just a skydiver and they just progress throughout their lives by doing more skydives. So that is basically the biggest part. If we go back once, I have to go to learn how this works. This A to B part, that's where you actually learn. For most, especially skydivers between 8 and 1,000 jumps, that's where they are. And that's how they progress in skydiving. So how does that work? What do you learn in that part of your skydiving career? I'm going to give a few examples. I'm going to scroll through this a little bit quickly, just to give you an idea, because every country is different, but they all have some kind of similarities. In the Netherlands, you start with your A license. You have to do 5 formation skydiving instruction jumps, where you basically learn how to skydive with someone else, relative to someone else. Fall rate, break off. You do 5 canopy control jumps to learn more about your parachute and landing. You do a basic, very basic theory test, and you have to do a few landings within 15 meters, a few other small things, learn how to pack. And basically, that's it. You'll have your A license. Now you can go to a drop zone and you can rent a parachute and go skydive. For your B license, you do 10 landings within 5 meters. You have to be a little bit more accurate with your landings. You do a little bit bigger theory test, but still quite basic. And you have to learn a discipline, which, for example, if it's free fly, you need to learn some basic head-up skills. You can do the same information skydiving. You have to learn a bit more about a discipline and then show that you master like some basic skills in that discipline. And you have to have a minimum of 50 jumps. That's your B license. Now you jump under your own responsibility, still under the under the lead of an instructor, but under your own responsibility. C license, an actual bigger theory test that you actually have to study for a bit. Still, it's mostly about regulations, meteorology, some gear, some important disciplines like sky surfing and style. And you have to have a minimum of 200 jumps. And then you have your C license, which means you are now an independent skydiver. You no longer need a chief instructor to oversee your activities. And then the next real big step, D license, what do you need to do for that? 300 more jumps. And you're done. And this is what you need. This is what you need to then go into your AFF instructor program or tandem master, etc. That's the Netherlands. I have to add, they are now working on adding programs for specifically free fly education, wingsuit education. It's still in the making. It's still not totally integrated yet, but that's coming. The first steps are there. Norway, 2 FS jumps for your A license. Basically, you need to learn how to track away. You need to learn packing, do a course, I think, for that. You need to show some landings and the basic theory test. B license, 3 FF jumps, basically where you, free fly jumps, basically where you learn about fall rates differences and potential horizontal movement. 6 canopy control jumps, a gear course, a few hour course about gear, and a theory test mostly about regulation, and you have your B license. C, that's pretty cool. You need to learn how to safely do a 270 high-speed landing, correct?
An introduction to high speed.
An introduction to it, okay. An introduction to high-speed landings. Toggle turns. You need to learn how to survive toggle turns, and then you're good to go. You have a theory test, and you need 200 jumps. In France, it's a bit. There's more. There is the B licensing system is a B. I think it's called BI4 and B4, and then BI5 and B5. They're actually bigger programs about learning free fly, the discipline of free fly. And it says something about what you're allowed to do in free fly if you allowed to jump with other people in free fly. The same for canopy, and they also have a wingsuit program. I just don't know which number or which name that has, but they have a similar thing for wingsuit. Your French sea license, with your French sea license, I don't have all the elements on here, but it's with your sea license, you're able to gear check another jumper, you advise someone on packing, organize special jumps as long as you're landing on a drop zone. And then your D license mainly says that you can jump anywhere in the world, land anywhere in the world. Correct? Then in France, they have something else. It's called brevet d'état, means the state license. So in France, you can actually get a license, a state license, state issued. And this license says that you are allowed to charge money for coaching, free fly coaching, for example. And at the same time also take responsibility over the safety of your student in that interaction. It also means that without that license, you are not allowed to charge money, and you also don't have the responsibility over the safety of your student. So that's the cutoff. The reason very, very few people in France have that license, Cathy has one, I just don't think she's here, but she's here at Paradise. She's one of the few who has one. I talked to her last week. It's basically because it takes you a year to get it. It's a serious, year-long process with many courses, many exams, many theory stuff, many practical internships, all kinds of stuff. And it's a big license. And in France, very few people have it. So the result is that people coach, get paid under the table, don't have any responsibility. Right, this is just to give a little bit of a picture of what the systems are in these countries here in Europe. So how do you then progress between AFF and your first 1,000 jumps? Well, you're going to probably do this. A lot of people don't even get their C or D license. Some people don't even get their B license. And they just jump. They're at their drop zone. They learn from the local drop zone operation. So the structure there is very limited, and it's pretty outdated, and it's very basic. So what you learn really depends on, for example, what your local drop zone is. There's a huge difference if your local drop zone that you go every weekend is the land or Zampuria, or if it's some tiny club in the countryside. So who is the local coach at your drop zone? The same thing. It's going to be very different at a big drop zone like that. Or if you're that club in the countryside, maybe the local hero, the local legend, is a guy with 1,500 jumps. And the amount of knowledge that they can share is very different from an epic center like the land. So do you travel? Do you go to boogies or skills camps or something like this? Also there, it really depends if you do and where you go. Some boogies are there with a lot. You can learn a lot about getting drunk and handling a hangover. And you know, some skills camps actually focus on skills and imparting knowledge. But they might also focus solely on the free fall part and not really teach you much else. You go to the tunnel where you obviously can fly, can learn free fall skills. What that creates, we see now, is people with a very high skill level but often a very low general experience in skydiving. So it kind of complicates the situation even more. And obviously you can go to YouTube to... So in this whole process, so when we're looking at, without making an argument of changing the whole system or implementing a huge international basic standard, or with just looking at what we have right now, we have all these different countries, they have different federations, they have different rules. They all have some structure in between this AFF and then the instructor, or the AFF and then the instructor part of your career. But in that part in the middle, there's not much there. What's the biggest factor there in what we learn and what we don't learn and how we get access to that knowledge? I want to make an argument that the biggest factor right now in this system is the coach. The coaches that are all out there. And it can be your coach, it can be, as I said, the local legend at the drop zone, it can be the coaches at the skills camp, it can be the most experienced multi-world champion people at a certain drop zone. This, for me, like in the last decades, I've seen has the biggest influence. Who is your coach? Who do you jump with? Who do you learn from? That's the biggest factor that says how much are you going to actually learn in those first 1,000 jumps, and how much general experience are you going to have, and how much flying skills, but more importantly, how much general understanding of the sport as a whole are you going to get. So I need to take a sip of water. Why does someone become a coach? Because when you have a certain amount of skill at some point, you're bound to start teaching other people. That's just how it goes at your local drop zone. As soon as you're one of the better flyers there, some people want to learn from you and you become a coach. Why do you become a coach? Well, I would say there's 3 main reasons to become a coach. There is to look cool, to get recognition, but also, obviously, for the free jumps. And obviously, it's funny, but it is actually why most people start teaching, including myself. And yes, some people continue teaching, and they, at some point, start being more interested in how to become a good teacher, and maybe they start doing it for the right reasons, but many people start for these reasons. So, the next question is, how do you become a coach? Well, again, there's 3 steps. It's very simple. First, you need to learn how to fly with a position like Will Penny. It's Floris because he learned how to fly like Will Penny. Next, you need to master head-up angle flying. I have my cursor in the screen, I think. There you go. And last, you just need to get a photo of yourself doing a breaker in the tunnel. And you're there. Well, if you really want to spike up your career, you make sure you get a bunch of followers on Instagram, and now you're good to go. You can start charging some decent fees. And these are the coaches, this generation of coaches who are going to be the people who are going to spread this knowledge onto the next generation. So the thing is, if there's no international structure and the licenses are sometimes outdated, very much basic, the amount of knowledge you can get is very, very different depending on where you are and where you go and who you learn from. So we've been thinking about this for a while. What if we want to do this better? What should that future skydiving education look like? And especially with the Instagram famous tunnel flyer in mind, how can we get these coaches to a higher level? So 7 years ago, I think, we thought, okay, this is the key, this is the factor. These coaches, we need to figure out something to get these coaches more educated. So with a few friends, we set up the Coach Masterclass, and we ran it for the first time in 2019 in Portugal, and that's also where we launched the first Live as a Pro conference as part of the Coach Masterclass, which was then called the Free Fly Coach Workshop. what I'm going to do is in the rest of my presentation is that's actually the goal of my presentation. I'm going to give you a little teaser of what the Coach Masterclass is like. So I'm going to give some examples, some clippets of some courses that we do and some stories for you to get a little bit of an idea of what the Coach Masterclass can bring, and maybe for yourself to consider ever joining one if you are interested in becoming a coach. Or maybe if you know of people at your local dropzone or friends that could really benefit from something like this, to get them onto the track and tell them to consider joining. It's a one-week model where we focus on education, obviously. We focus on, we kind of try to offer structure, what it is that you should learn, should be learning, what it is the basics that you should be knowing, what is kind of basic safety before you start teaching. It's a kind of a framework. We try to spread awareness around this idea that the coaches, educated coaches, are very good for the sport and for the general knowledge base and experience and safety. We try to inspire the future generation, of course, of coaches, and we try to implement a little culture change while we have them. Say a little bit more about that later. Here I want to make an argument that the most important factor, the most important element of the Coach Masterclass, why it was initially the Free Fly Coach Workshop, is free fly. Okay, we're also going to teach them about canopy flight. We're also going to teach them about drop zone operations. We're also going to teach them about behavior in the plane. We're also going to teach them about gear safety. But free fly, for me, is the biggest chapter. And why focus on free fly? Well, here I'm going to start. When we start the masterclass, one of the first questions we ask and one of the first conversations we have is, what is free fly? We have this conversation. And I just got a new one this morning. Oscar, he sent me, free fly is the freedom of doing what you want at that very moment. And here are a few other. I think free fly is the possibility to fly your body in any orientation. Mason, one of the most influential free flyers from Australia. Free fly is art, and art needs to be beautiful, from South Africa. Free fly is a style of skydiving that involves flying the body in non-traditional orientations, not just belly to earth. In free fly, jumpers might be head up, head down, tracking, back flying. Who do you think wrote that? And then we got free fly to me is flying without limitations in your orientation. Belly, head, feet, back. Truly to fly freely. But note that there's no mention of any diagonal movement, angle flying, tracking, right? Said someone from the United States. Huh? So here, I'm going to take you on a little sidetrack in the story, because this is one of my personal pet peeves. And I initially almost wanted to make my whole talk about this very topic, because I'm so passionate about it. I've been able to squeeze it into a little 10-minute intermezzo in my talk, but I'm going to share this with you. For me, I saw this for the first time when we got sign-ups for an event. I think it was Paradise, actually, back in the day. Someone has 800 jumps, 50 free fly jumps, some tunnel. We need to put them in the groups. We don't know this particular person. They indicated in the form that they wanted to work on angle jumps, so we put her in a very beginner angle group. And we start on the first day, and after a few jumps, he comes up to us and is up to me and says, like, why am I in this group? Like, I am, like, these are all beginners. Like, I am, fly any belly back, I can be, so, but you had 50 free fly jumps. How you can, yeah, free fly, but I've got like 300 angle jumps. Okay, wait, there's some miscommunication here, I have to realize. And what we had as well is someone who emailed us and said, yeah, Paradise, I would like to come to Paradise, but I know it's a free fly skills camp, but I would like to know if there's also any angle flying going on. And I realized we're having this miscommunication, and I tracked it down now to mainly the American region of the planet, where the description of free fly has kind of settled on this head up, head down, and for some people, belly back. But some people even just say, okay, head up, head down. What are you guys going to do in a jump? Free fly. It means they're going to do head up or head down or both. right? And I strongly disagree with this description of the discipline. But I've tracked down 2 arguments. I'm going to tackle both of them. So first, this American person who gave me the definition of free fly said, okay, so what about angle flying? And I got back, angle flying needs its own separate distinction for the reason that it's moving off jump run. To be sure, everyone on the load understands there's a group moving, right? But then I'd say, you need a lot more information than that. Because is this group flying flat tracking, flying very far but descending very slow? Or is it a head-up angle jump and are going very steep but not moving that much? Or are they tracking the whole jump? Or are they going to stop halfway and do some big movements and eagles? And also, if you have different groups on the load, if you would say free fly is just head up, head down, or free fly is the vertical aspect, you'd also want to know more. Is it a head down jump? Because it's quite fast. Or is it a head up jump? That's already a difference when you're thinking about exit order, for example. Is it a dynamic free fly jump with carving and eagles? It's even slower. So also you need to ask more questions, right? So, and also for head up and head down flying, we already have a name. It's called head up and head down flying, or VFS perhaps. Right. So this argument for me is we need to talk about way more things than just saying I'm free flying and I'm angle flying. So that's my argument. That argument doesn't go for me. The other argument is, well, it's because of the history. Because back in the 90s, the first school of modern sky flying, Olaf Sipser and his crew, they invented free flying, and they were doing head down and head up. Before that, it was mostly just belly flying. And they started for the first time experimenting with head up and head down flying. There was also some crew in Europe doing that. And that was the new discipline, and it was head up and head down. And okay, yeah, later, some people started angle flying in the mid-2000s, and then they're calling it angle flying here, and they were calling it tracing there, and then we kind of converged and calling it angle flying. But that's, came later, it's a different story. So that's a good argument, right? That's like the origin of free fly is just head up and head down flying. It's a great story. Only problem is, the story is wrong. And I'm going to submit 3 pieces of evidence to my point. First, I'm going to ask you to listen to what Filippo Fabi, right now the sponsorship manager for Tonfly, said about free flying in 1997, I believe. This is Olaf Sipser.
Of talented people who have flying skills enough already developed, so now they can use their imagination and imagine a direction.
I like to free fly, so I like to track and go down into straight down, head down position, and go back into a track, do some transition, move all over the sky.
So that was IPO 97. Around the same time, one of the first real free fly teams, Psycho Circus, Heath Richardson, this is what he said about free fly.
Same skydive, we'll start out tracking. So we're working on that horizontal plane. Then we'll go into sit flying and start the vertical aspects. And then we'll start flocking, doing the diagonal, and just completely at the same skydive, changing attitudes and dimensions all at once.
I don't think anybody can ever get to a level where you've done everything you can do in free flying and just keep progressing and progressing, and it makes you that much more eager to
flying is limitless, and there's no telling which direction it can go. We all know we're at the space game side of free flying, we have a three-way side, and it's literally limitless where it can go. It's just as far as, it'll go as far as we're going to take it.
All right, and the last clip, it's not that you didn't have enough evidence already, but it's just really fun to watch these old videos. So the last clip is Eli Thompson, the Flyboys, perhaps the most influential free fly team of all times, at the cradle of the sport, from the movie Crosswinds. And tell me if there were not angle flying back in the day. All right. Basically, I know language changes. I'm just trying to do my part to protect. For me, the reason I started loving skydiving, I fell in love with skydiving, I fell in love with free fly because of the free aspect of it. Everything's possible. You can do whatever you want. You can move all over the sky, as Ippo says. Let's keep that term free fly as this large realm of possibilities, and then we can talk about head-up flying and angle flying. This was my personal frustration that I got aired with you guys. Okay, so when you truly understand free fly, the reason why I think free fly is the most important part of the masterclass. When you truly understand free fly, you also understand exit order, you understand fall rate, movement, tracking, gear safety, etc. So that's why this discipline encompasses so much of the sport that I think it's a great place to start. Another class we're doing is jump runs. It's one of those classes that people often come back to at the end of the week and say, whoa, I didn't know there was so much to know about the sport and about jump runs. And I can't believe how much I learned. This is a 3-hour class. I'm now going to give you a few minute summary of it. I'm going to go through it fast. But just to give you an idea how much there is to understand about jump runs. Because before you even think about exit order, you want to know what the jump run is, right? And that comes before. So the jump run, what's the jump run direction? What decides the jump run direction? Anyone? The winds, the upper winds. What does it mean if we drop past or prior a 0 point? You know, if the drop zone is somewhere, we're going to drop early or late, or we're going to move the jump run in this direction or in that direction. Or we're going to offset the jump run to the side because of maybe wind coming from a side, or people want to go track in one direction, or because there's an ocean on the other side. For whatever reason, we're offsetting. What is actually the 0 point? Because it's not the same for every drop zone. It can be the center of the landing area. It can be the manifest. It can be the T, the winds. It can be anything. So these upper winds we talked about, how do they affect us? Well, I've heard say in the past that the wind pushing on your body affects, the way you fly, the way you displace yourself. If you're like vertical or horizontal, for example. I remember back in the day that the local swoop king in our drop zone, he said that when there's more wind, as soon as you dive down with your canopy, the wind pushes on the roof of your canopy and keeps your canopy in the dive longer, so you have to initiate your turn higher. It's total bollocks. If you're in a hot air balloon, you don't feel any wind. It's because you're in a column of moving air and you're displaced over the ground. So we drift with the wind. We're not affected by the wind, but we drift with it. How much do we drift? Well, if we have 60 knots of wind, what's a knot? Anyone? People who did the masterclass this week cannot answer. What's 1 knot? 1
nautical mile per hour.
1 nautical mile per hour. What's a nautical mile? 1.85 kilometers. Wow, really good. So 60 knots. If you have a 60-second free fall and you have 60 knots wind, you spend that time in the free fall in the column of air moving, you'll move 1 nautical mile, which is 1.8 kilometers. So that's the trick. can use, if you have 15 knots of wind and you spend the same amount of time, you will move around 500 meters, a quarter nautical mile. Right, so this is a trick you can use to start calculating, okay, what should this jump run look like? Where should we exit? What's the wind doing? Where is it coming from? How strong is it? What does it mean if we're upwind or downwind compared to the drop zone? Obviously, it's not too complicated. It means if the wind is coming from the south to the north, and we are upwind, where are we then? North or south? We're upwind. So we have the wind in the back to come back, and we're downwind, so we have to fly back into the wind to come back. All these terms, you need to understand this first before you can even start thinking about what a jump run looks like, right? How do the lower wind affect us? Well, it's our canopy flight. The lower part, under 4,000 feet, right? What's most important there is how to make it home. How to actually get back and land safely on the drop zone. So how do we do that? How do we calculate that? How do we plan a jump run? So the glide ratio of a parachute is more or less 3 to 1. What does that mean? It means that for every 3,000 feet we fly horizontally, we'll drop 1,000. This is obviously very average. It depends on your parachute, your wing loading, the model, and this is in no wind condition. As soon as it's windy, this will change. But this is in no wind condition, 3 to 1. Well, the easy thing we have between feet and meters is that that's a more or less of a 3 to 1 ratio. Well, so a really nice and easy trick I learned from Petter is that for every 2,000 meters that we fly over the ground in zero wind, we descend 2,000 feet. Or the other way around, for every 2,000 feet that we have, we can fly 2,000 meters forward. So if we know this, and we want to know a jump run, and we want to make sure that everybody can make it back to the drop zone, how long can a jump run maximally be?
$10,000 meters, 12,000 meters.
Depends on the wind conditions. In no wind conditions, under these circumstances, how long can we have a jump run if everybody needs to make it back to the same spot? Let's say that we have 3,000 feet of canopy traffic. You need some part for your opening. You want to have some part for your landing pattern. So let's say we have effectively 2,000 feet of vertical to get somewhere. 2,000 feet of vertical gets you 2 kilometers from the first people out of the plane. 2,000 feet of vertical from the last people out of the plane gets you 2 kilometers. 4 kilometers or 2 nautical miles, simplified, is our maximum jump run length. That's the starting point. Okay, now we know that, and then we're going to start thinking about Then we're going to start thinking about where to place this jump run. How do we need to make it shorter? Do we need to move it upwind, downwind? Do we need to offset it, etc.? Who's on the plane? How many groups do we have? What are they doing, etc., etc., etc. Airspeed versus ground speed. So now we're going to start thinking about an exit. What's the difference between airspeed and ground speed? Not so complicated. Airspeed is the speed we have relative to the air we're flying in. Ground speed is the speed we have relative to the ground we're flying over. But why do we talk about the difference? Well, this has been misunderstood a lot in the past, especially by inexperienced skydivers. What is our goal when we're thinking about spacing the exits? What do we need to accomplish spacing the exits? What we actually need to do is we need to get, we actually need to space the groups over the ground, right? That's the most important part. Often we have high winds in the top and the winds are not as high maybe in the bottom. So if we'd have people with very high winds, people taking the same amount of seconds that you would say, okay, the wind, the wind speed is high enough to have enough separation between the groups. You'd have the first one go out, second one go out in free fall. They have quite some good spacing. But when they come lower to the ground and the wind is not so strong, now they end up very close together again. So the measure we use to think about spacing groups on a jump run is the ground speed. That's the thing that counts. That's important when we try to come up with this. And then there's a trick. There's a lot of different numbers, but a very easy trick to remember. Actually, the goal we want to have is 1,000 feet between groups over the ground, or 300 meters. So after everybody's opened, where you open, 1,000 feet or 300 meters. Obviously, depending on what those jumps look like. How big are those groups? How much tracking are you doing for break off, in what direction, etc. So it might need to be more. But for normal vertical jumps, small groups, 1,000 feet, 300 meters. How much time, how much ground speed, and how much time equals that distance? Now, there's an easy cheat sheet. You sometimes see them in planes or on drop zones, so you can use. But for yourself to remember, 80 knots ground speed, 8 seconds delay. That's super easy. And then for every 10 knots ground speed, you take off 1 second. And for every 10 knots ground speed you take off, you add a second in the top section, in the normal range. Normally, if you, let's say that a plane has a 100 knots airspeed on exit, you have a 20 knot headwinds, you have an 80 knot ground speed. That's kind of normal. If you get really, really strong winds, you can see in the bottom, it starts to change. Now, all of a sudden, you're adding 6 seconds for just 5 knots more wind. So more wind, less ground speed, right? If you're flying into the wind, we're assuming we're flying into the wind. Obviously, it's possible also that we're flying downwind sometimes, or crosswind. Another problem there is that if you have an early deployment or a cutaway or something, that altitude you can also cover a few miles in wind drift. So not so advisable to jump in those conditions, but that's a trick. This is just a little bit of an idea of what we do in the class. This class is now we've talked about this stuff for an hour and a half normally. So you actually get a deep understanding of what this means. And then we start taking maps of drop zone all over the world. And then we give a bunch of metrics for that day. Let's say, okay, we have so much wind from this direction. We have those obstacles over there, whatever, an ocean. You have this kind of load with some four-way, some sky surf, some wingsuit. Okay, now you're going to draw a jump run on that map to match those conditions on that drop zone. So they actually have an aerial map, and they're going to have to figure out what the jump runs should be, and then we talk about that. That's a jump run class. It's always really fun to do it. This I've already said. Another class we're doing is the sport didactics. Quite dry. Also here, I'm not going to take too much time. We talk about the didactics. Basically, is the scientific approach of teaching, sport teaching, and this is not talked about a lot in skydiving. You become a teacher because you're better than someone else, and you start teaching. There's not a lot of people who actually learn how to teach. So we try to implement that. This is basically a 2-year education crammed into 1 3-hour class. So again, here, this is just kind of a teaser for the participants to start thinking about teaching. And now we're cramming that 3-hour class into a 5-minute section. So you can imagine we're getting a really short excerpt. We're talking about 3 didactical models on the neurological level. So what happens in your brain, in your neurons, in your system, and on the psychology level. The phylogenetic model talks about instruction. Sensomotoric model talks about how to process feedback. And the inner game of tennis. Anyone of you read the inner game of tennis? If you should be. If you want to teach, it's just kind of mandatory, I'd say, by now. Completely revolutionized my outlook on teaching. So this is the result of the end of the class. The phylogenetic model basically talks about there's different areas in the brain that process different kinds of information. The cortex, the neocortex, the outer shell of the brain, basically handles new information. So when you're trying to learn a new skill or you get a new piece of information, it's the cortex that's handling that. And they've invested and they found out that actually when you start learning something, information actually moves to different places in the brain. So when you've started automated something like riding a bicycle, you can ride a bicycle while talking to your friend and looking at your phone. And you can do that without the bicycle riding becoming more difficult. Maybe the traffic becomes less safe, but it's automized. And that's actually no longer in the cortex, that's in a deeper system we call the paleo system, in the deeper parts of the brain. And then you have this old brain, the brainstem and the spine, where your reflexes are stored, like breathing, yawning, blinking, etc. But there is actually a science behind how to move new input from this neocortex into the paleo system. So you can actually learn how to, first you learn a new move, you try to implement, try to execute a new move, and then you try to move that physically, neurologically from this new information brain to the automized part of the brain. And that's what we talk about in this class, how we can actually do that try to do that as a teacher with someone. The sensomotoric model talks about feedback, about how you have an output that generates a move or motion, a muscle contracts, does something, you get different kinds of feedback back into the system, and now you adjust that output to change or improve a move. And we talk about the difference between intrinsic feedback, basically feedback that's connected, intrinsically connected to the act itself, or extrinsic, for example, someone telling you that you did something right or wrong, or how you should be looking, or very, very practically very interesting, very, very, very handy for actual teaching. And then the inner game of tennis, as I said, for me this really revolutionized my. I only read it a few years ago when Marius told us to read it as a homework piece for the masterclass, and totally changed my outlook on teaching. Basically, what it says is there's two kinds of brains, two kinds of people in your brain. You have the self one and the self two, and the self one is basically the talker. I sometimes mix these up. Yes, the talker, the voice in your head. Yeah, you're doing great. No, you suck. You're never going to learn this. And oh, now you had this is perfect. This voice in your head, the thinker, the talker, the analyzer, self one. And then you have a self two, which is like the baby. The babies learn how to walk before they can talk. Nobody's telling them how to do it. They just see and they copy and they learn it. Yes, they have more neuroplasticity. They are faster to learn, but they learn it nonetheless without any words, any vocal input. The argument here of the book is that this self-2 and this self-1, they're always there. It's just the self-2 is often overshadowed by this speaking voice, self-1, this analytical voice in your head. And the key point is that self-2 is actually a lot better at learning things. If you can only quiet the self-1 and you let the self-2 just see and feel and flow, that you might learn some things a lot faster than when you try to analyze it, talk about it, get feedback, try again, etc. Super interesting theory and worth diving into when you want to teach. Yeah.
You're going to tell us about self-3?
Next time. So this is the psychological part of teaching. Okay. Another thing I mentioned culture change. A little bit inspired by, so this was the last, you recognize the banners, the last Life as a Pro conference, where we had speakers talk, and one of the people we invited was Marius. And Marius he was one of the people to also help us set up the Coach Masterclass. And he spoke about something that really inspired us, and inspired us to also think about culture change. We also we do a few of these things in the class. We talk about radical candor, for example. It's a little bit inspired by your talk with Project 19, I think. We talk about the effect of gossip, what it does to your personal trust relation when you gossip about other people, these kind of things. But this one is the biggest one. Marius gave a talk. It was called "How Well Do We Fail?" It was based on a book. It's just called Black Box Thinking. And the book basically talks about the difference between making a mistake in a medical industry and making a mistake in the aviation industry. Where in medical industry, he has a few stories as examples. People are shit scared of liability. So when they make a mistake, they try to do everything they can to hide that, to make sure that nobody finds out that they actually made a mistake, because it's about people's lives and the liability is huge. However, in the aviation industry, you have a black box that's there to record as much as possible, to analyze as much as possible about what went wrong, so that we can learn from it. It's a huge culture shift from one to the other. And basically his argument is that for the skydiving world, who of you doesn't know the feeling of landing after a jump? And you think, fuck, I hope nobody saw that. I do. And most people do, even if you don't want to admit it. So one of the things we do in the class is we do a fuck-ups roundtable. We have one conversation where each of us admits a story of a grave mistake they once made, shares it with the class to open up. I know Pete Allen was one of the speakers. He does it when he's coaching a new team. He starts by trying to find, maybe even fake a mistake of himself, points it out to everyone else, I made a mistake here, just to show that it's okay to make mistakes and it's even better to admit it because that's how we can all learn. I'm going to tell you a little side story. One of my fuck-ups, one of my favorite fuck-ups roundtable stories. It's a great one, I love it. I was invited to come to coach at Fly for Life in DeLand. This is probably more than 10 years ago. I was excited because I did a lot of skydiving in Europe, very, very little in the United States. Okay, this is one of the best, highly seen free-flying events in the world, especially in the United States. I was invited to coach there. Yes. Okay, this is going to be good. I come there. DeLand was never been to DeLand before. Huge drop zone, epicenter of skydiving history. It's very impressive. And I get a group the first day. And before we're going to go for the first day of skydiving, we all get called into an office by Shannon Pilcher. And
That's a real story.
yes, real story. We got called into the office by Louis, maybe, and you were there. And what they said is, okay, what we're going to do, Shannon, we're going to give each of the coaches a fly sight. We're going to stick them on your helmets so we can GPS track your itinerary in the sky in your free fall. We're going to track your movements. You're going to, before your jump, you're going to get a map. This is where we got our idea for the masterclass. You're going to get a map and you're going to draw your tracking itinerary you're planning to do in free fall. And this is also now something we practice, we do in the masterclass. We also do have these fly sites and we do this. Because I thought it was a great idea. Fuck, we can learn from this, amazing. So we all get, we hand in our helmets. Overnight, they all put the flight sights on all our helmets. In the morning, we get our helmets back and we go up for the first jump. Whew, super excited, United States, Fly for Life. Whew, I'm here, baby. Putting my name on the scene. I'm gonna make it in the United States. Fantastic. So I get to the door. I was the third or fourth exit, so I didn't really care to spot. There was 3 groups in front of me. I believed that they all had the experience to spot for me. It's going to be fine. Climb out the door. Exit doesn't go great. So there's some tumbling and there's some turning. And all right. We recover. I take my position, look around, and that's kind of the first time I look at the ground. I don't know if any of you have ever skydived and skydived the land. It looks like this. I did have a plan. I had jump, run, runway, because we're going to jump parallel to the runway. Jump, run, runway, we're going to do a 90-degree left. I don't remember exactly the plan, but I did have a plan. I drew it on the map and confident, fine, easy. I do that all the time. Until I saw this. I had no idea which runway we were talking about. So, to the best of my knowledge and ability, I try to come up with something. I think we tumbled this way. The plane is going there. I hope. Okay, so we should be going this direction. Really, really hoping that we're all going to survive this. Dumb luck. We opened somewhere. Nobody, we didn't crash into another group, right? And we didn't land on top of another group, and there was no canopies, and much more dumb luck than actually knowledge and skill. But okay, good. I land. Fuck. Yeah. I hope nobody noticed that. This is not good. Okay. Someone else comes to me, another group, and says hey, why did you open over there? I thought you were going to open over there. I said, yeah, no, I made some kind of excuse matrix story. But that nobody made a big point out of it. And I thought, okay, I got away with this one, this has saved me from my career in the United States would have been over immediately, until the fly sites. I said, no, fuck. And now I already started lying. So not really lying maybe, but not, at least definitely not admitting my mistake. So now I'm fuck, now I can't, what do I do now? This is going to be this was great. This one shot I got at the Fly for Life camp, but this is going to be my last one for sure, okay. The next morning, I think that evening, I don't remember, I think it was the next morning because you guys needed time to analyze the fly side data. The next morning we get called into an office to talk about the results of this, the map. They had the fly sites, the GPS data, the maps, etc. We're going to talk about. So I was like, going in there, I really didn't feel like it, but okay, you just have to face the music, right? Shannon says, sorry guys, we screwed up. We have no idea which fly side belongs to which helmet. And I still wonder if it was because you looked at the first one and you compared it and said, this makes so little sense, it must be wrong. So I got away with it. I never admitted it to anyone in that moment, in that week. And never talked about it then. I talk about it now and I talked about it later, but that moment, for me, I was like, I got away with this one. Nobody's noticed it, great. Nobody learned anything from it. Well, maybe I did, but nobody else learned anything from it either. So basically, long story short, this is the kind of culture change we want to implement by admitting these mistakes, by making talking about the fact that it's actually really cool if you have the courage to admit your mistake, and especially as a leader, especially as a coach, and try to see if we can trickle down this culture into the skydiving sport, which is difficult because there's so many big egos, including my own. So that's another quick story about a lesson in the Skydive Masterclass. What should a good coach master? So now if we're looking at the whole Skydive Masterclass, the whole course, what should a good coach master? See what I did there? Flying skills and techniques, obviously. Belly flying, back flying, head up, head down, track, angle, dynamic. Teaching skills, we just talked about that. We did one class about teaching skills. You could use a whole year about it. Navigation. Yeah, we have a whole class about navigation. We use the fly sides. We talk about this. We have 2 days of angle flying, people leading angle jumps and working on navigation. What it means to be a load master, how to spot, how to make an exit order. What's the fall rates, the wind drifts, the group size, the movement. Okay, you get it. You know, there's a lot to learn. And this is not even everything. So when we started doing this, started making this, we had to start already with kind of killing our darlings. We had to pick and choose, like, what are we going to actually do in this 1 week that we have with them. I remember having a conversation with Sharon also, like, about we were talking about her about this in the beginning, like, which elements are you going to actually put in there? What's the most important? And we quickly realized that it's 1 week was not going to be enough. So we came up with 3 levels for now. Skydive Masterclass level 1, which is a 1 week. Skydive Masterclass level 2, which is not necessarily for people who are better flyers, but it's for people who have done level 1. And then we have a level 3, which is there on paper, but we've never done it yet. We're still waiting for the body of people who've done level 2 enough to do a level 3 class. One of the things we learn every time, and it's one of the things I get most excited about too, because it counts for us as well, is that people realize how much they don't know in a week like that. And that's what they take away from a week, is that they now have an idea of where they are on the spectrum of how much should I know as a coach, and how much do I already know, and am I ready to start teaching, and what else should I be learning to get there. We now have 63 level 1 students signed off, and 15 more coming here in November. We have only 8 level 2 students. I think we have one over here. And we have 0 level 3 students. So that's a story of the future. What we've also done now this week, last week, for the first time, is we've added a Skydive Masterclass, which is basically a masterclass with some of the same classes, but now it's directed to people who not necessarily want to become a coach, but just people who want to educate themselves in the sport, who want to do more than just this AFF to D license with these few, theory courses about sky surfing, and actually want to learn about the sport, because there's so much to learn about it. And we really applaud the fact that some people are actually eager to do that, to invest a week, not just learning, how to point their toes out when they're backtracking, but actually learn about all the different elements in the sport. So we've done that for the first time this week with 3 students. And I hope we're going to get to do some more in the future, because I think it was a good first run. Another thing we're doing is, because we are talking about this perpetual learning and growing of knowledge, is that ourselves, we also once a year, once every 2 years, we set a 2.5-day workshop for ourselves, where we invite an outside coach to coach us before we run the Coach Masterclass. So we also stay in this perpetual learning and enlarging our knowledge and self-awareness process. In short, the masterclass should be motivating and not restrictive. It's not like if you don't do the masterclass, you can't be a coach. That's not where we want to go. We want to motivate people to learn more and to become better. It's about deep insight. You don't know what you don't know. It's about passing on knowledge and an attitude, a culture. And we're also not planning to franchise this and make this a global system that everybody has to follow. We actually invite, and I've said this before on a different podium, we actually invite people to copy this initiative and even copy our curriculum if you want to. We invite other people in other places in the world to run similar kind of projects to get the coaches first and foremost, and maybe later also the body of skydivers, to a higher knowledge level and experience level broadly in the sport. And if you're actually ever thinking about doing something like that, or you hear about someone thinking about it, they're always free to contact us, and we're always happy to share with them. And also, I want to ask all of you to help us think if there's ever something you think about, you ever have an idea on how to improve this, or what to add to it, or what should be the next step, to contact us and let us know, because we're super open for inputs, and this is only like in the beginning stages, so we'd love to get better with your help. So think about that. That was it. Thank you very much for your attention.